you kind of lost me at data transfer. I don't know what's going on.
FTP, file transfer protocol.
Now, what we have to remember is that not every position can be changed to every other position.
And making sure that the users we have now stay happy and stay on while trying to attract some other people to play.
They make
Hustle home, but
today.
yeah. No, that's over in a heartbeat. Ain't got any problem with that.
Welcome to another episode of This, That, and the Other. I'm your host, Magic, sporting my Redskins gear again. Hopefully, we'll have some folks on tonight from the MAC conference in Leahy World. That conference is loaded with humans. All but about 3 teams, I believe, are in fact human coached. So that presents itself with some unique opportunities, such as getting a lot of recruiting money by making the playoffs, making those deep runs when you've got a lot of humans. Tends to happen for more teams in the conference like that than if there's a bunch of Sims in there. So hopefully we'll get some of those folks on. I know TribeWriter is on with us tonight. So we'll get an introduction to him and kind of see what he's about and pick his brain some on that MAC conference there in Leahy World, or Leahy, depends on where you're from as to how you say it. But anyway, again, welcome to another episode. Do want to apologize for the last episode. We had Jordan on from the What If Sports customer service team. A very important show, in my opinion. Supposed to be informative for the fellas and ladies out there that play Gridiron Dynasty, and also that are just competitors in What If Sports in general. Jordan had some information for us, and the audio on that particular broadcast was garbled for some reason. Don't quite know what happened there. I've run some tests since then, and everything seems to be working. So hopefully we won't have a recurrence of that. But just to kind of recap, Jordan said everybody's working hard behind the scenes. I understand there's been some potential for system-wide updates in the past that may or may not be applicable to every world in every game, but they are making some changes from time to time. And in the individual games, as far as the like Hardball Dynasty or your basketball games, etc., some of those are getting updates while others won't, because the concentration has been on those games. So that just makes sense. So if you're not getting an update to an engine as fast as you like, we just ask that you have patience. Things will get better, as I've mentioned before. And he did say that Gridiron Dynasty was the one being looked at here in the near future. So hopefully that means there'll be a rollout for us. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to get TribeWriter on and let him talk a bit about what is going on in the conference that he's in. Unfortunately, he's having some video trouble. So we're going to add him to the stream regardless and let him speak from the Black Netherlands.
Oh, I am so sorry. This camera I use every day for work. It's never let me down, and all of a sudden it will not turn on. I've probably restarted 4 times, and it just won't. But that's okay. I have a face built for radio, so
That's what they used to tell me when I broadcast radio sports games in college and high school. They said, "Yeah, I had the perfect face for it." So totally understand. In this case, we'll go on nonetheless. I know you and I had talked a bit via site mail over the past several days, and again, just want to personally say thanks for at least reaching out to your conference mates to see if they'd be interested in being here. I know it was super short notice, so totally didn't expect everybody to be here, and maybe some will filter in, and if they don't, maybe they just don't care for the show. It's not for everybody. Totally understand. But you guys are welcome back on anytime, and if you want to have a conference-only show, all you have to do is let me know, and we'll get that set up, and that goes to everybody out there. If you've got a particular group of fellows or ladies in the conference, and it's something special to you, and you want to come on, by all means, let me know and we'll make that happen. But as I said, you and I have talked just a little bit in the last couple of days. And I've done some research on the conference and found some of the things that you were mentioning, but I definitely want to thank you for that input. But before we go any further, definitely want to understand who you are, where you're from. I know you and I have talked, but for the rest of the folks out there, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, I live in Dayton, Ohio. I've got. I started playing Gridiron Dynasty in season 2, and you can imagine how long ago that was. So you know that I'm not exactly a young buck anymore, but that was I played for a long time, and then I took some time off. I played again for a long time, and then took another vacation, played another internet football game, and then came back to Gridiron Dynasty about 8 seasons ago. So it is. It's been fun. It's been interesting. I think having tried other games, I still think it's the best one out there. It is. It's certainly the best community, the most active community, and there's a lot of positives to the game. I know there's things that could be improved, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with my experience there. Any time I've left has been just to give myself a little bit of a break and to try something different.
Sure, I understand. What is it that you do, and what about your family life?
I'm in higher education marketing, and I've been doing that since 2008. Prior to that, I was a sports writer for 25 years, and I'm married with 3 kids and 6 grandkids. And so every once in a while, when I have a Zoom meeting for work, there'll be a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old sitting on my lap through the Zoom meeting, and my colleagues seem to enjoy that entertainment. So that's always a lot of fun when we get all them together.
I bet. Now, being a sports writer, tell us a little bit about that as far as the medium. Was that newspaper, magazine? Go into some of that if you can.
Yeah, I worked for 3 different newspapers, but I spent most of my time in the newspaper in Canton, Ohio. And I covered Major League Baseball, the Cleveland Indians, for 14 years. That's how the tribewriter email and moniker got started. And that was my beat for 14 years. I also covered a lot of other things while I was there. Certainly had some fun interviewing some of the greats of pro football for different special sections that we had, during Hall of Fame weekend. Getting to meet some of those people in person was really a cool experience. So I did have a lot of fun stories from my sports writer days, but the being on the road was not a great thing, and eventually I had to make a choice. So I went with a different direction in my career.
Yeah, that being on the road stuff can wear on anybody. It's usually nice and exciting, but once that newness wears off, it gets kind of old. I can appreciate that, having traveled extensively while I was in the military. About the only thing that made it exciting was going to different places. But after a while, you're going to the same places. It gets kind of boring, monotonous, and you'd rather be home with the family. So totally understand that. Now, as far as being in GD, you say you started in season 2. Was that in, let's see, season 2, it depends on what world you were in, kind of go back and figure out, that way, how long you've been playing. But I can, I played in Stag, I believe it was, is where I started in season 8. So that was like 2015. So yeah, you've been at this for, 2005. So yeah, you've been at this for, almost 25 years just on Gridiron Dynasty.
Wow, I had not considered that. I would have been in Bryant World in season 2.
Yeah.
And I actually had to wait to get a team. I couldn't get a team in season 1 because they all sold out. So I had to wait until season 2 to get started in Division 3.
Yeah, I remember those days when the worlds would roll over and you were anticipating a job at the next level, and there were limited worlds at that point and quite a lot of players. So the reality was, in order to move up, you either had to move up to a really crappy team, or someone at D1A had to leave to open up a spot for a person from D1AA, and of course the trickle down effect happened at that point. So it was always exciting, and I guarantee you there were people in the hundreds and hundreds sitting around their computer, the wee dark early morning hours, waiting for that rollover and trying to get on so they could process or apply or submit their application for that particular school that opened up. And it was always a letdown when there was like 3 jobs and you didn't get any of them.
Oh yeah, it was really competitive in that regard, and yet it was a lot of fun because with those worlds being so full, you felt like you were part of something that was really big and really popular, and it was, right. And it was a lot of fun to be involved in something that was that powerful, it's a much different atmosphere now, much different culture, but there are still good things going on.
Yeah, when they started adding worlds, every couple months, I think it not only diluted the challenge, if you will, of playing in fewer worlds where you really had to be on your toes to move up and get that good resume to be successful at the next level, get a decent job, etc. Once they opened up so many worlds, you could, if you weren't having success in one world, you could just jump ship and go to the other and try your strategy there, because there were tons of sim teams just waiting for someone to take them over. And it kind of took some of the, for lack of a better term, magic out of it, if you will, some of the anticipation and the excitement. But we've seen the ebb and flow. We've seen it get full and then dwindle down again and come back up. That's why I'm excited when I see a league or a conference like yours where you've got all but, I believe it's 3 teams that are human coached. So was that something that had been discussed previously? And
that certainly appealed to me. I thought, well, that would remind me of back in the day when all the worlds were full, just playing in that. And of course, last season when when I joined the MAC, there was all 12 teams that had a human coach. Wow. And I thought, wow, this is very unique. Certainly, at a non-power conference level, but to be able to see 12 teams with 12 human coaches was it's something I looked through all the worlds. I was just curious as to whether there was any duplication of that, and certainly not at Division III, Division II, Division I AA, or the less than power conferences. There was nothing that was even half full. So to me, I thought it was a unique opportunity, and I jumped on it when one of the human coaches left and the university came open.
Well, you'd mentioned that Kev Max was wanting to get at his alma mater. So you left there, Ohio, I believe it is, and switched over to Northern Illinois, if I'm correct. Was that something because you two had chatted before, your previous acquaintances, or did he just send you a site mail and say, hey, get off my team?
Well, previous acquaintances, like we had probably known each other about 3 days at that point. I sent out some site mails to some of the better coaches in Division I AA saying, hey, there's an opening here. It's a fun conference. Why don't you try joining? And he bit. And then in the coach's corner, he posted that he was an Ohio University graduate. And I'd only been there 2 years, enough to get things started, but not really to completely make it my team.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what, if I can give this guy his alma mater, maybe he'll stick around and maybe we'll be a step closer to having a full conference. So, and Northern Illinois was a good situation. They've had the coach before me was very successful. I said, why not?
Now I saw on some of the information you sent, as well as some of the research I did, that I guess it's SJURAT.
If you say it fast, it sounds like sewer rat.
Yeah, exactly. The Akron coach has been there 165 seasons. So to say that he's a homesteader is an understatement. But, you know, the guy's been there, like I said, 164 seasons. 35 of those, he's won the conference championship. And ironically enough, he's not pulled in any national championships while he's been there. But again, you know, that's like you said, that's not a power conference or a power 5 team. So it's much more difficult to do that in D1 AA and D1A. Brian Lee, Eastern Michigan, the only human coach they've had, has been there for 155 seasons. And then the rest of the gang, Frito Man, 49, where he's at, 24 for John Dish. Sir Biff has been there 8. Displaced New Yorker, been at Buffalo for 7. And Northern Illinois, that tribewriter guy is taking his shot there after being at Ohio for 2 seasons. So you've got a good blend, a good mix of guys who've been there for a while, guys who've been there for an extremely long time, and some new blood. So as far as the board goes, is it usually pretty active for you guys on the message board within conference?
Yeah, there has been quite a bit of chatter there, and another thing that drew me to the league. But maybe I chatter too much. I need to dial it back a little bit and let somebody else fill the board. But I noticed that there was quite a bit before I joined, and there has been since. And that level of activity kind of helps you develop an affinity for the league. You know,
Yeah.
You feel like you're part of something. You feel like you're a group of guys, and I know it's the internet, and I know that our culture doesn't really, it's more of a me first type of culture. But if you feel like you're part of a collective effort that is worthwhile and fun and a good diversion from, you know, maybe a lot of us have, you know, difficult jobs during the day, and you know, to be able to you know, think about something else besides our jobs, you know, I think that there's some value to that. So I like the level of chatter, the level of activity, but I also think that helps solidify the league a little bit as far as, you know, having some emotional stake in it, having skin in the game.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You know, and you get a sense of ownership for that conference. You know, something, especially if you've been there for an extensive period of time, you know, you almost feel like it's something that you've built up. Having those other coaches come in, being able to keep those other coaches in the conference and keep that camaraderie going year to year to year. Now, as far as advantages goes, you know, we, of course, the overlying disadvantage is that it's not a Power 5 conference. But the advantage is, and I touched on it earlier, was with so many teams being human coached, the odds of making the playoffs each year stand to go up quite a bit. So you should get quite a few teams in the playoff, which results in more money for each team in that conference. So has that been helping out recruiting quite a bit?
Wow, you know, you've hit it. You've hit the high and the low point, the two ends of the spectrum of being in this league. You know, we do usually get 5 or 6 teams in the playoffs. It does give us money, and it gives us a recruiting advantage over some schools that play in the BCS conferences. You know, I was looking at my spreadsheet here the other day that I keep to kind of figure out how much money the other teams have, and we had a significantly more recruiting money than most of the schools in the ACC, which was
Wow.
and we do end up recruiting against those folks somewhat. So and even the Big East teams. So you know, I think that certainly helps us out. That you know, that $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 from playoff money certainly helps us out. But the downside is that unless the structure of the game changes, you know, none of us are going to win a national championship. I mean, a sewer rat, I'm going to call him that because I don't know what else to call him. He's been there 150 plus seasons, and he's finished as high as 4th. And that's probably about as good as you're going to do given the current structure of the game with the elite advantage and that sort of thing. So you have to decide, you know, are you happy playing the game, knowing that you're probably not going to win a national championship, but you could really enjoy your experience, you could, winning the MAC championship in a full conference certainly has some value. And are you going to play the game for fun? I guess I have, excuse me, a little bit of an advantage because I've won some national championships, so I don't, I don't have to go to bed at night feeling unfulfilled with my GD experience. If I had never won a national championship, perhaps I would feel differently. But I'm okay with just playing the game for fun at this point.
Now, as far as the playoffs go, since we've gone away from the bowls and incorporated the playoff format at D1A several months ago, that should in of itself increase the opportunity for at least a chance at a national championship through the playoff structure. But again, the reality is the quality of the team makeup, those rosters tend to lean heavily toward those Power 5 conferences. Are you guys seeing a bit more success as far as making deep runs in the playoffs than you were, just at the bowl events?
From what I've observed, we've experienced increased success in the first half of the games. And I don't mean to be a smart aleck about it, but honestly, if you look at last season's games and the season before that, most of the MAC teams were in those games at halftime, and most of us are playing top seeds. We're playing USC and LSU and Florida and all these schools, and at halftime, most of our games we were close to, not tied, but within a touchdown or so. And then the second half, eventually the randomness evens out, the numbers take over, and the teams that should win the games end up winning the games. But still, at halftime, when you look up and you're only down a touchdown to one of the elite teams, and you start thinking that maybe this is it. Maybe this is going to be that day that the MAC overtakes these schools, and that day may come. It's just given the current structure of the game, the way the code's written, all those things, it would take a really special set of circumstances.
You take that that one Cinderella team with all the dominoes falling at just the right angle, just the right place to knock everything down to the national championship game. Get that monster recruiting class, click in that senior year. And I could see that happen. It'd be a one-off experience, but it would be interesting to watch that run through the playoffs. As far as your recruiting money from the playoffs, you mentioned $50,000 or more, I believe. As far as others who may be contemplating doing something like this, as far as filling up a human coached conference to get that playoff money, the majority of the teams in this conference are relatively close to some pretty powerful schools. Your Notre Dame's, your Ohio State, Penn State's not far away. So some of those elites would tend to have their way with you regardless of how much money you had to throw at them for recruiting effort. Would you recommend taking that money and doing more battles than you normally would? Or would you use that money to kind of leverage some of that distance recruiting and get some of those guys who aren't heavily recruited, say up in the northwest corner of Washington or, up in Maine, for instance?
Well, how boring do you want me to be when it comes to numbers? Because I'm looking through, and I'm no spreadsheet guru, but I built one where I add in, the scholarships available, plus the playoff money, plus the what I am assuming, and I hope is correct, that at least I hope that we're close to knowing a 10% advantage for the BCS conference teams and another 10% for the elite teams. And I'm going strictly on what the user guide, a GT Deuce, wrote a few years ago, where I come up with those numbers. So I'll give you an example from last season. We're in the middle of recruiting now, so I don't want to give away proprietary information. But last year at Ohio University, I had 12 scholarships $238,000 was my effective recruiting budget. So 12 scholarships, 180,000 plus 58,000 in recruiting money give me 238. Okay.
Wow.
And when I look at other teams that had 12 scholarships, let's see, it was Washington had 12 scholarships, and with their playoff money and their advantage, their BCS advantage, he had 275,000. So I had 238, he had 275.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I go to a power conference elite team that had 12 scholarships, let me see if I can find one here. Florida had $350,900 to spend. So, you're talking more than $100,000 advantage for Florida with the same number of scholarships. So you have to keep that in mind. That's why I don't pick fights with Notre Dame, although I ended up being in a battle with them this season for a recruit, but that was unwittingly. We both kind of jumped on the guy at the same time. But I'm not under no illusions that I'm going to win a battle when I'm already at $100,000 disadvantage going into it.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about those recruiting battles where not only is it a BCS team, it's an elite team, and it's closer to the recruit. That's just how many red flags do you need to see before the answer is no?
Yeah, and these are for guys that are just down the road from me, but they're also just down the road from Notre Dame. So exactly. It's not like he's got to spend a ton of money to recruit those guys. So that's the reality of it, and you have to accept that and stay out of those battles. Now, maybe I would battle, Clemson or somebody like that who is maybe we're equal distance from the recruit and he's not getting that elite advantage. Clemson 2 years ago only had $12,000 more. Again, this is an effective recruiting budget than I did. So maybe I do go ahead and battle Clemson, but I don't battle Notre Dame. I'm not suicidal when it comes to these things.
It's throw money away if you do, most times than not.
Yeah, so that's the reality of it, and you have to accept that when you come into it, and you draw your fun from those battles that you do win, and maybe occasionally the elite coach will lose his taste for the battle, or he'll find somebody else he likes better. I don't know. I mean, it would have to be an odd scenario for a MAC team to win that battle, but then you just try to have the best recruiting team in the best recruiting class in the MAC. That's what you can hope for.
Yeah. Well, let's change gears just a little bit and talk about something that I initially thought I would enjoy doing, but it's a lot easier said than done, and that is achieve a feat like you did. I believe it was in Bryant, first coach to win a national championship at all 4 levels. Tell us about that.
Well, that was a whole lot of fun. It was a different time in the game as well, but to be able to see that happen, and I did take over pretty good programs on the way up, but I wasn't cherry picking with somebody else's recruits. I won those championships with players I recruited, but it was again early in the game, and it wasn't so early in the game. We're talking about like season 131 was maybe my last season there. So it wasn't so early in the game, but there were still some milestones to be had. And, when you have a chance to set history, now where we've been playing 200 seasons, those opportunities are pretty rare. So you do enjoy those things to be able to make a little bit of history. And it was fun. I don't know that my kids or grandkids will ever take great pride or put up a billboard saying that my grandpa won 4 levels of national championships in Bryant World, but it was still in the context of playing the game. It was fun.
They'll get you a shirt one of these days.
I've got a shirt that says Gramps. That's the one I really.
There you go. Now, on those 4 national championships, were those teams managed pretty much the same way as far as roster makeup, formations, and strategy, or was it just totally different with each of them?
No, actually, I kind of have been sticking with the same, excuse me, the same sort of system for a long time, and I guess I would call it a balanced system. I run a very balanced offense. I pro trips, and just try to balance run and pass. I run very balanced recruiting classes. I enjoy I guess I enjoy the most the chance to to have a pretty good team every year, as opposed to trying to develop one super team. There was a guy in Adobe that made it to the national championship game in Division II with a roster of 37 seniors, and I thought, that sounds great to get there, but to have to endure 3 seasons of trying to watch these guys, learn the plays and fumble the ball all over the place, and watch them, really you suffer for 3 years. I don't know, to me, the even classes sounded better. So I guess that I've stuck with a balanced offense. Pretty much 3-4 nickel, 3-4 or 4-4 nickel defense. Just a pretty standard stuff.
Now, do you subscribe to the fairly common 5 quarterbacks on your roster?
No. I've always tried to recruit a quarterback every other year.
Okay.
And enough so that I'd have 2 active quarterbacks and 1 guy getting redshirted.
Right.
So I know some guys like to have the redshirt senior every year, but I found that trying to get all those guys enough playing time so that they fully develop is pretty difficult when you've got more than 2 active on your roster at one time. I think there are guys out there that can figure out how, and especially if you're in a conference with a bunch of sims where you can run your freshman out there, and he won't kill you against a sim team. But I guess I came up in a time where there was mostly human coaches, and you just didn't get away with that stuff. So I've always been a guy to recruit a quarterback every other year, try to have 2 active and 1 redshirting.
Well, let's talk pork. You've probably seen pork on the message board way back when. Punter or kicker? The old pork. There's I'm a subscriber to the one punter that does my kicking, and of course he does the punting. I don't carry a kicker, or in those rare situations where a punter's not available that's decent for cheap, and I'll go for a kicker and let him do my punting. But I found that I tend to have more success with the punter kicking field goals than vice versa. How do your teams look when it comes to punters and kickers?
Like I said before, I take a pretty standard approach to things. I've always had a punter and a kicker. I've never experimented with having only one. Now, when I took over at Ohio U, there was only one on the roster, and he actually was a pretty good kicker, a punter who was a pretty good kicker. And maybe I could have at that point, but I was just more comfortable with the standard approach. And I don't know that I would benefit that much from having an extra guy on my roster, especially if he wasn't seeing enough playing time to fully develop. I don't know that the reward there would have been worth. I don't know if they're worth the risk, but if you've seen that there's no risk, then maybe I need to rethink that. But if I've got 10 defensive backs on my roster, some of those guys are not going to see much playing time, and if I keep 11 instead of 10, I don't think that's going to help the situation. So that's how I've always rationalized it. At the same time, I've never been brave enough to try to see if that one roster spot would pay me some benefits someplace else.
And I think it's more advantageous at the lower levels, honestly. I don't think it works out too well at D1A, but definitely D2 and exceptionally at D3. Heck, at D3, you can take a good quarterback and convert him to a kicker if he's got adequate strength and technique, and he'll do well for you. Speaking of the various levels, which is your favorite?
Boy, that's a hard one. I think that one AA or Division One is certainly the most competitive. And if you like me, I've been staggering around all day because I was up at 3 a.m. recruiting. So you can't do that when you're 60 years old and not have it affect you. So that's the 3 a.m. wake up call is part of Division One, and you've got to understand that if you're not recruiting, somebody else is.
Mhm.
So that is part of the challenge of Division One is that you've got a lot of smart people up there. Division One AA can be fun, but can also be frustrating because you can have your recruiting class pretty well set, and then somebody from Division One will come in and especially if your vision's high, they're going to come in and take some of your best recruits, and you're going to have to really scramble. So it can be fun, but there is a level of frustration there that you've got to come to grips with. Division Two, I had really a great time at Division Two. It's you don't have the money issues that you have at Division Three. It is you do get to use your full game plan. It's more competitive. If at this point, some of those Division Two worlds aren't very populated. When I was in Dobie, there was like 19 human coaches in the whole world, and so you got to decide whether it's enough of a challenge or whether you can live with playing Sims all but one of your conference games, for instance. So there's that, and then Division Three. I guess it depends on what you enjoy. Some guys will stay there and really maybe they're coaching at a school they really like, or they're but you're playing with a lot of empty teams and a lot of guys that are just learning the game. And if you are willing to act as a mentor to those guys and try to keep up their enthusiasm for the game, then more power to you. I think that those guys can be valuable down in Division Three.
Mm-hmm.
I liked my time there. I enjoyed it, but I'd say I just give you a very long answer to a very short question. But I'd say Division Two would be my favorite level at this point.
Now, do you subscribe to the recruiting tools like the one that Ed Zimney has out? And I know we had Yatzer for many, many years. Or do you use your own? I know you talked about spreadsheets briefly. Do you use any of those tools? And if so, do you like them?
Well, if people watching this and listening to this remember back that far, there was a spreadsheet called Maddie's Dad.
Maddie's Dad, yeah.
Maddie's Dad, I took that, I adapted it to my own use, and I have still using it all these years later. Having said that, I used Yatzer for most of the time I was in GD, and I thought it was a really good tool. When it came back and it wasn't working anymore, I dug up my old Maddie's Dad spreadsheet and checked the formulas and found that it was still pretty viable. So it had the advantage to the Maddie's Dad spreadsheet was it had several different kind of rating formulas. And so, I would try to recruit a guy that looked good in all those formulas. Mm-hmm. And, some of those formulas may not really relate as well to the reality of the game today, but some of them placed a little more emphasis on potential and, different things. So anyway, when I had like 5 different rating formulas in that spreadsheet, and if a guy that, looked good on all 5, then that was the guy I tended to go after.
Yeah, I like this spreadsheet simply because of the ability to get real close to the projections as far as, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year projections. Where is this guy going to be, with max playing time and based on his potential, based on his work ethic? It really did a good job of showing you kind of where your team would be in the future. And one of the advantages to that is you could forecast some shortcomings or some holes that you needed to fill throughout recruiting, so that by the time that season rolled around, you could have that hole filled up that you would have otherwise not even thought about. I know with O linemen, always had an issue of having 2 seniors and the rest were underclassmen, and they just never seemed to be able to pull their weight. So I was able to find offensive linemen that with their work ethic and their potential, even though they may not be cream of the crop the year they were recruited, they would show up 3 years later and be worth quite a bit. So yeah, those spreadsheets help quite a bit, especially with the GD analyst that Ed's got out right now.
Oh yeah, that's great.
See the recruits and the other schools and the distances, and the actual recruiting tool in of itself is pretty awesome to have. I like being able to identify how many scholarships the school has left without doing a bunch of homework. So that's
right. A game analyzer. If I strike it rich, I'm going to send that guy a whole lot of money, because that has been a great tool. I use that a lot. I tend to game plan for specific opponents. So if I can take that and make it part of my game planning, it is really helpful. I also wanted to go back to what you said about potential, because recruiting in the MAC, that's got to be a very big priority for you, because you're not going to get rarely do you get a top 25 recruit at any position. You've got to, a lot of times I'm hitting guys that are in the 50s and 60s and 70s on the spreadsheet, and you almost have to get guys with high potential if you're going to go drop down that low on your list. So, but that's part of the reality of being in the MAC, is that those are the guys you're going to be recruiting, and you don't want to pick up a guy who's number 80 at his position in his class and then has low potential too, or that'll really do you in. So that's part of recruiting in the MAC as well, is you look for potential, and it's a very high priority for you.
And that's one of the things that it is the sad reality of those elite teams or the upper crust BCS teams is a recruit is only going to grow so much, and if you've got a running back with tremendous athleticism and he's at 90 speed, 90 strength, 90 elusiveness, his game instinct is up there, technique is up there. This guy's only going to grow so much. He's not going to grow a whole lot. But if you're a team that doesn't have a good opportunity to snag those type players, you can get those players after they've been at your school for 4 years. They will grow into that caliber player. So now, at your 4-year level, you've got a recruit who is very similar to the guy that was in the same class with him, but he had those values going up. He just hasn't grown as much. As a matter of fact, I think I've got let's see if that's on here. Yep. As an attribute approaches max, the growth decreases. If you read that, it makes a lot of sense. And I don't remember who it was that was talking to me about that. It's been years ago, but it makes sense that they only grow so much. You don't have a 90 guy that's going to grow to be 120, 130, 140. It just doesn't happen. They're going to top out at 92, 93, 94. But where that difference comes in is the top schools are getting those players every year. So their freshmen are 90, 90, 90, where your freshmen, and not you personally, but at the non-BCS schools, you're getting players who are, 75, 80, 75. But as a senior, they're rather comparable. Now, the advantage is, as I said, those elite teams have those type players across the board, where the non-BCS or non-elite teams, they have those players that are, like I said, in the 80s or 70s. So where you see that really make a difference is in the second half of a ball game, kind of like what you were talking about with the playoff run, because you've got players who are worn out in the second half or at the end of the first half that are your starters because they're the cream of the crop, and the backups are just barely, breathing and know where the football field is, where your opponent, his starters are, single digits away from his backups. and those guys are rotating in and out of the game. So you've already got an advantage there because they're not tired. Your guys are. Their third stringer is as good as your first stringer this year. So those are some of the disadvantages you have when you're, grouped in a non-BCS conference like the MAC. And you said you've got an opportunity every once in a while to snag a golden nugget here and there. But when you're situated in that reality where you're not going to get those 90 players, what do you feel is more important? You mentioned the potential. At D1A, is it the potential or is it the work ethic? Because again, remember, we talked about potential and, he's only going to grow so much. So me personally, I value work ethic a little bit more so that he can get, up to those max numbers a lot sooner. What is your take on that, if it makes sense?
I'm really changing. I don't want to say changing, but I'm certainly developing an understanding of how important that work ethic can be, because you need your guys to be able to play sooner than the guy at Alabama does. And that's one place where the game does reflect the reality of college football is when Alabama plays Bowling Green. In the Bowling Green may be fairly close at halftime, but in the second half, that depth, the Alabama's running NFL guys in and out every play, and Bowling Green's, 3 NFL guys are shot physically, and it's and it's going to take over, and that is someplace that's something you see in GD as well, is that those guys are that depth is going to end up winning the game for Alabama. So I didn't think about it when I first started at Ohio U, but now 3 or 4 seasons into it, I'm seeing that work ethic, it enters into my thinking for recruiting a lot more than it did, because I see where I want those guys to develop. Not only do I want them to develop faster, I need them to develop faster because they got to go out there and play. So, I'm going to say that you called it on that one. I'm thinking that you are absolutely right, and especially in a MAC situation.
Well, we're almost to the close of the show, but before we go, you have the platform to reach a bunch of newbies who have just come on today. They've bought their tickets and they're coming to see you talk about Gridiron Dynasty. What nuggets of wisdom do you want to share with them?
Well, I want to tell them, first of all, that it is a dynasty game. And if you are the kind of person that wants immediate results, it's probably not going to happen for you immediately. But if you give a situation 5 seasons, if you get to the point where now your 5th-year seniors have been redshirted and they're recruited by you, they're high potential guys, you'll see a pretty dramatic upturn. And if you go out and my first playoff game, when I came back to Gridiron Dynasty, my first playoff game in Division II, my team lost 84-0. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go play checkers or something, because this is just ridiculous. But I stuck with it, and by the time 5 seasons were up, my team was beating that team. So, I want to stress that patience pays off, and also, don't do try to derive enjoyment out of the game for something besides national championships. Mm-hmm. You want to strive for that, you want to push for that, but don't lose. Don't have it ruin your whole season if you don't, because there is value in the fun, the interaction, the good things that go on in GD.
Well, good advice, and definitely words of wisdom for those newbies that come on. And newbies is not a derogatory term; it's a term of affection, because we've all been newbies. That's what ties us all together with one commonality: is we all started this game without having a clue. So I definitely enjoy visiting with some of the veteran coaches as yourself, been around forever and ever and ever, and enjoyed the information that you presented and enjoyed the opportunity to visit with you. And thanks for accepting the invite. And like I said, let your guys know that the platform is open for you. Just holler at me and we'll make it happen for a conference visit.
I enjoy your show. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And anytime, you're more than welcome back anytime. You don't need a special invite.
Sounds
Well,
great.
folks, that's going to do it for another episode of This, That, and the Other. And I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. I'm your host, Magic, and we'll see you again next time.